We're back, ladies and gentlemen, for another whiteboard edition. What are we talking about? Well, let me show you. You see that? Damn, every single time. There's this thing about the vector candle that if you are a seasoned hybrid system trader, you'll understand that price always ends up coming back to that imbalance. This would be, in principle, a red vector candle, and this right here is, of course, a green vector candle. Now, for anybody that is new, the only thing you need to do is just go over to the Traders Reality website. There is a free course that explains to you exactly what this stuff is. Okay, and it gives you an in-depth course on how to understand how these candlesticks work. So it should be somewhere here. No, it's the other side. Yes, so should be something here that says go there and you'll be able to watch that course. It's an hour and 10 minutes, man. If you don't want to learn anything else about it, just watch the section on the vector candles and it'll explain exactly what these bad boys are all about. So what is it that we're actually making reference to? Well, over the weekend, I projected a move that was going to occur on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. Now, it's not that it was going to, it was a guesstimated reason for Bitcoin to make a recovery back up. Now, there are a number of factors that were coming into play. You have to remember what this weekend was about. First things first, every single time. First things first, Donald Trump was in Asia, okay? And what do we know about that? Well, we know that there's a discussion between China and the USA regarding the good old trade, okay? So that in itself is what? This, ladies and gentlemen, is sentiment, okay? Now, if we just go back and look at where we were in the charts to help you understand this logic, you'll then come to understand why Bitcoin in principle, well, one of the reasons was that Bitcoin had made a recovery to the upside. In front of you is the projection that I gave. Now, this is a projection that I give over the weekends for the Platinum members. And what they get is a breakdown of price and what it's likely to do as we have the creation of the psychological levels. Now, in reference to those psychological levels, I'm talking about this story right here. So if you go to the Traders Reality website, go to the courses section, and when you select this one here that says Start Learning, it's going to bring you up a few modules surrounding the hybrid system and helping you understand what it's all about. Now, that was a day when I used to have hair. Anyways, and the context that we're discussing is the psychological levels. Now, the basis of my projection was on the fact that we had come into a couple of levels in the chart that Bitcoin was showing promise to. So we go over to it and we look at the actual projection. Now, you see these two yellow lines that go across the chart. Okay, this was the previous week's psychological levels. This area here was the psychological high at the 111,979. And then this one down here was the psychological low on the 109,579 region. Now, if I draw your attention to a couple of points, which was what led me to as one of the reasons as to why I expected price to go up, you'll then understand why I projected everything else that is going to come and we're going to present to you very shortly. So if you look to the left, you can see here at the start of the psychological ranges, there was an influx of orders coming in, which forced Bitcoin's price to the upside. Okay, so I know that if price is going to come to this spot again, there's going to be a reaction. Does it guarantee that we're going to get this same reaction as you can see over here? No, not quite, but we have to make the assumption that if the market is going to return back to a specific point that triggered interest, then it could be a number of factors. It could be options traders, dealers, market makers who are having to transact. We don't know what was going on at that point at that time, but visually we can see that there was activity at that price point, which was 111,979. When we look further in, you can see that that same reaction happened over here again, where we saw price move up above that zone. Okay, so I'm already seeing that the market is showing me that this level is very important. As we go through the chart, you can see that it broke down and then it made a recovery back up towards it. And then we saw another reaction at that level. What was this level here? It's the start of the psychological high, and it's deemed as a very important zone in the chart, speaking in Bitcoin, okay? So we can identify there were three instances. You've got the first one right here, you've got the second one right here, and then you've got the third one right here where price had made a move towards and made an explosive move higher and left the imbalance behind, which is this red vector candle region right here. Now, as you can see, price had equally come back down again and traded into the current week's psychological ranges because I did this on the Saturday, okay? And price had made a recovery back up. Look at where price was relative to where we were expecting price to go. We wanted to see Bitcoin make a pump to come back into this previous vector candle recovery off the logic that there was interest in and around this range right here. Now, keep this image in your mind. So, one other important factor, besides what we just discussed, given that sentiment across the board was optimistic because of what was happening with regards to Trump and China. The second aspect to it is the environment. Now, according to that image that I just showed you, we had the psychological levels and price was reacting at these points. Okay? Now, in the first instance, the first reaction gave us green vector candles to the upside. Price then come back down, gave us a bit of a breach, and then they come back up, broke away through it, come back down again. And at the point of the projection, we were here, right? So what's the next thing that we need to take into consideration? The environment. In order to project if price is going to go from one spot to the other, you have to have an environment that would justify the logic of sentiment justifying a reason to go up or down. But in this instance, we were looking for price to go up. Behavior around key areas is another important factor. So let's just now take the idea of environment behavior to help us understand how likely we can assume price is going to go to a specific point. Now, let me bring the image up for you right now. In front of you, you can see at the top side of the range that you've got this red vector candle. Imagine that red vector candle here. Let's color it in because we're artistic like that. Now, that red vector candle was all the way at the top side of the range, okay? That was my point that I wanted to see price go towards. Now, go back to the image. You can see that there is an initial reaction from the market at the psychological level. So already in my mind, before I gave the projection, the anticipation was that sentiment was backing the idea that price was going to go up. Environment, well, can't even spell it, but anyways, but environment was also suggesting that price had a place to go back to. Why? Because the vector candle itself is a memory in the market, okay? Memory. And that's something you've got to remember. Typical, isn't it? You are trading the market's memory. Why? Because a red vector candle in principle is what? It's where participants were running shorts off the back of the market maker dealers and other players who are running longs as price goes down. Okay? So that means the guys who are participating in marking price lower and picking up the bids, that means they're buying as price drops, they are going to want to see a return on their investment later on. So, with sentiment, with environment, I'm not spelling it, leads to the likely journey it's going to make. In other words, where is the memory going to get triggered? Referring to the idea of environment, we identified that this red vector candle up here was a range that we wanted to trade back towards. Why? Because we understood that price reacting at that point, which was the psychological level, is a key area where the market's memory could get triggered again. Okay? Remember, they build their shorts above key notable areas, and then they build their longs above below key notable areas. You can see they sold their shorts, and then they started filling their longs, which was the V-shaped reversal, not V-shaped, but A-shaped reversal in price on Bitcoin. But they did it at a very important level, which was the psychological high. Now, going into the environment, look at what was going on before I gave the projection. I wanted to see price make a move down to then make a move up to come back into the vector candle recovery region over here. Look at what was going on. During the eve of the Friday, you see here that they had made a nice move to the upside, okay? And that followed by the move up in the day on the Friday, okay? Now, look at these green vector candles. Look at how the market is trying to push price higher. The environment was suggesting that the market's memory was being triggered. Now, here's a key thing. Look at this area, psychological low. This is where they started to move up again. So the market's memory got triggered because you can see over here, the same green vector candle came into play. Okay, so there's one subtle clue. Then we go back out again. You can see another cluster of vector candles coming in, meaning that the market's memory was being triggered in and around this key area. Then we see this red vector candle breaking price down, but it stayed within the psychological range. Look, the psychological high is here. The psychological low is right there. But that was from the previous week because we identified that over there was interest. There's those green vectors. Look at the interest right there. So then when you zoom out, you can see that there is clear participation from markets or market makers, traders, whatever you want, that are favoring higher prices on Bitcoin. So they marked price up, they filled their bids once more time, which led me to this projected zone right here to see the breakout to the upside to come back into the recovery of this vector candle. Okay? Look at the environment. You're getting the clues that they want to try and mark higher. Why were they not looking to go lower? Well, here's another tip. Do you see any vector candles that need to get recovered inside of this range? There is hardly any. Green vector candle was fully recovered. They come back in. The blue vector candle right there. And if you look, you see this range here? That was a candlestick. So they fully recovered that blue vector. Other than that, there was nothing left for them to do inside of this range. So in other words, the market's memory had fulfilled the idea that there was not really any imbalances of significance that would justify price to go back down to it. When they tried to mark lower to collect the bids, they prevented it with this red vector candle, and price in that session ended up sending price higher. Now we were looking for the retrace continuation back up. Now this is what had happened. There's that psychological high from the previous image. There it is right there. 111,979.13. Well, wait a second. Let me just change that. So it's actually 979.13. Let me just mark that off correctly. Okay. Market's memory gets triggered. Look what broke out of it. Green vector candle. So is it safe to say that the market's memory had been repeated again? We understand it to be the case over here. Once, twice, 3 times, and it happened again. That then led to the recovery of the vector, which is what we wanted to see them do over here. Now, where did Bitcoin fare? I wanted to see 113,433.46. He said to the guys, just be very mindful of it, take profits accordingly, all right? And Bitcoin had effectively broken out of that range and cleared the 113,989 to only retrace back into the zone and then shift back out again. So I was being a little bit conservative. But what's the key factor that you've witnessed in regards to this play? The market's memory had been triggered again and again. And if you go back in the charts and highlight the psychological levels and pay attention to how price is when it's surrounding those, exactly the same way I did over here, then you only improve the odds of the trade working in your favor if you take the trade and align as much detail as you can or information. So we wanted to see sentiment. We got it. Trump, China, happy days. The environment, looking at it, green vector candles coming into play, the market's memory over here, the market's memory over here, the imbalances of the vectors over here as well. The logic was all there for us to assume that price was going to give us a pump at the weekend. Converted the same thing over to Ethereum as well. Same logic. Look at how Ethereum behaved. Made the move to the upside for the recovery of the red vector candle. The same environment was a little bit cleaner with Ethereum. But you go over to Ethereum and you can see Ethereum smashed it. Ripped it to the upside. There's your red vector candle recovery right there. Okay? Where was it relative to the psychological levels? Let me show you. In front of you, you can see that Ethereum psychological levels were much further at the time of Bitcoin's when this last week's projection was done. Okay? As you can see, Bitcoin's psychological levels was all the way over here. Now, look at this for Ethereum. That's the image, okay? There's the psychological level, green vector, pushing price up, right? Going to the current week psychological level, which was the basis of me placing the trade, okay? Or giving the projection. You can see, again, reaction at the psychological level, market's memory. Zoom out, price goes up, retraces into it, finds support, breaks out to the upside on the psychological high, shifting out towards the recovery of the vector. Now, as a rule of thumb, the idea is that whatever Bitcoin's going to do, more than likely Ethereum and Solana is going to do the same thing. Let me show you Solana. Solana was the same logic. We wanted to see Solana try and make claim to the upside from this range. She already had recovered the red vector candle, but she had a little vector all the way up the top side of 202. And they had this wick over here. So we go over to Solana and we see what happened there. She cleared that wick. She came into that recovery point and then came back into those red vector candles and cleared 202 and went to 205. We wanted to see the projection of 199. And we ended up seeing 205 all the way to the top side of that range. So I was a little bit conservative, but we got the move, we got the proof, we got the environment, we got the sentiment, and the market's memory was triggered. Are you always going to find the right environment? Not necessarily. And does price always go back to the vectors? Not straight away. But here are a couple of factors that are going to help you understand it. First things first, you need to make sure that sentiment is matching up with the idea that we are going to go in a specific direction. So if there was no trade talks, okay, then the idea is that sentiment would have been negative, okay? And traders would be like, oh, they'd be concerned about things and probably offload during the weekend. That would mean that we would look in the chart in terms of environment and then say to ourselves, oh, what can we see? Can we see any green vectors that haven't been recovered just yet? Then we would trade towards that logic, okay? The market's memory. This is really important because the market's memory is going to be a point in the chart that you can identify when buyers will be sellers and sellers will be buyers. That's what you're looking for when it comes to the vector candle. So, to put it into perspective, red vector candles imply that they are buying, okay? That's what red vectors are. It's buying behavior, all right? So we're going to mark it off. That means buying. We'll do the same again and identify that the green vector candle, in principle, represents selling, okay? That is selling. Now, you're saying, hold on, Tino, how can price be rising? That means it's selling. And how can price be dropping? And it means buying. Because conventional trading wisdom teaches you that when you see a parabolic candle, get ready to buy, which is why 90% of retail traders buy at the highest point and why 90% of retail traders sell at the lowest point. You would never buy an investment of value with the desire to sell it as cheaply as possible. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. Your goal is to buy it at a discount to sell it at a premium. Yes? But we're taught a different way. We are made to believe that when price is rising, it means that they are buying. Woohoo! Who are they buying? Who's buying? It's who they are selling to. That's the key thing. You are being sold to when you are buying. And you are being purchased from when you are selling, okay? And the vector candles give you those subtle clues of the imbalances that occur, and that's where you as a retail trader have got to try and gauge the likelihood of price coming back into that imbalance to effectively trigger the same logic again. Sometimes you end up seeing a vector candle, a red vector candle forming at a high, which could usually be at an all-time high, right? And then you see price doing this. It goes down, up, down, up, down. Then the environment is created where you start to see green vectors, blue vectors all appearing at the lows. You've got a moving average right here. And then price breaks above that moving average. And then it starts to trail upwards, trail upwards. It completely recovers this red vector candle, creates a wick, a stopping volume candle, and then ends up coming back down again. Why does this happen? Again, because the same memory that was triggered there ends up triggering here. The guys that started buying from here have sold into the liquidity up here, and then they start the same process again, market lower, and then in this instance, you'd probably see more red vector candles, and then price ends up coming back up again. Didn't you ever wonder why the stock market has a 100% success rate at recovering from crashes? The stock market doesn't stop going up. It will forever keep going up, but there will be instances when it retraces and then continues back up again. So to finalize, for longs, sentiment. What's going on? We got a trade talk, we got tensions. What is the actual story? Price would have needed to create the environment that it has been dropping. You have to identify that there are vector candles where price has been before so that you can identify 2, environment, and then 3, memory. Vector candle, memory. Red vector candle, memory. Flip it on its head when you've got a big move to the upside and you've got green vectors, okay? Green vector, green vector. What are these vectors? Memory, okay? Memory, get it in your minds. Why? Because the same players that were there before are probably going to get there again. Why? Well, let me just explain it to you. Imagine you're a market maker, okay? And you have just moved price all the way up to this range. Up here, you were able to transact 4,000 contracts. Why? Because everyone was like Bitcoin to the moon and going crazy about it, okay? You were able to transact 4,000 contracts of whatever asset. It doesn't matter. So when price drops all the way back down again, as a market maker, there's a point of interest in the chart where you know you can initiate a transaction. So then what you do is you start building your plays. And then you start consolidating. Give people the belief it's going to go back up after all the players that went short got shaken out. Oh my days, comes back down again. Then it continues to come back up slowly but surely, then continues. And then all of a sudden, pop, they make that move to the upside and they happen to transact the same number of contracts up there again. You see, market maker has no bias to whether price should be up or down. He don't care about your 4-year cycles with Bitcoin, doesn't care about your rainbow theories. He only cares about risk. And where can he offload that risk? By means of hedging, okay? If he can effectively mark prices up and build his shorts from the highest point, okay, he can cover himself by marking prices lower, go long at the same time, and then send it back up again with the liquidity he engineered from the move down to use it to then bring it back up again and repeat the same shit over and over again. This is what you see. That's why the market doesn't care about direction or price, but it cares about who's transacting at those levels. That's what I mean by the market's memory. Second time to finalize. You can see that this is the structure you're looking for. This purple line is your 50 EMA. And the general consensus says that if you've got an imbalance at the top side of the range, then it's all about what happens down here that's going to help you understand if they're getting ready to mark up. Remember the image that I showed you on the projection from the weekend. Look at the environment. Key aspects to it are these vector candles that you see that appear at the lows of a move, okay? Because everyone already is in the mindset that price is going down because the red vector came into play and it marked it all the way down and gave them this choppy behavior, okay? When you start to see a shift in the way the candlestick behaves, that shows you and demonstrates that they want to try and mark higher. Taking trades within these environments over here are usually going to lead to a good and a high probability of price coming back into the inefficiency of the marketplace, which is that red vector candle, which is exactly what we did at the weekend. I'll just stand back so you guys can take a screenshot of that, but just go back into the charts and you'll identify it by yourselves. Look for price after a move to the downside. Why are we looking at it from this perspective? Why? What about shorts? Don't short. Why? Because everything is optimistic right now. You've got development with relationships in AI and businesses. They're all doing all sorts of things. OpenAI have just come out saying that, sorry, a US government contract has just been released for AMD to create certain chips. So the relationships are all developing. They're all coming into action, right? Right now, the sentiment is everything is going up. So when you do see price dropping down, it's a test of your dip buyers until they're given a reason to not buy. And if you don't see the reason for them to buy, it means you're not seeing this sort of structure. It means that it's less likely to come back into this. Again, ladies and gentlemen, focus on sentiment. We're getting interest rate cuts. Woohoo! Trade deal with China. Yeah, baby. Deals with OpenAI. Companies are doing awesome on earnings. It is a fantastic scenery. Environment. Can't even spell it again. Vectors. Where are your red vector candles? Are they missing? Have they been recovered? Or green vectors? What environment are you trading? Okay. Do you see price making a drop and then it's consolidated? Do you see green vectors appearing at the lows from the move? Is it below a key moving average? Do you see a green vector breaking above the 50 EMA? Take the trade. But the main one, which justifies the reason why price is going to go back to the vectors, is the memory. Now, before anyone becomes a clever dick and says, yeah, but there's a vector candle down at $1.06 and Bitcoin's 190,000. Listen, that is just dead. You've got to focus on the vectors that are close by, because according to the projection, the vector was very close. And we are all about trying to improve the odds of price going back into that by collating that information in terms of environment and, of course, sentiment. Okay, my vocab and writing is absolutely shocking, but you get the idea, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Mad love and respect. Hit the like button, do the due diligence, subscribe for more flavor like this, and I'll be catching up with you all tomorrow. Peace.